In this video, we're going to talk about OC. Fun subject. Haven't talked about it like at all, because it's not really something that I would really recommend to very many people. However, you have some channels like ASP, like Active Self-Protection, talking about how this stuff is miracle juice. Okay, so anyways, let's go ahead and get into it. So the history of it, it's been used since ancient times, like in the Asian continents. In like the powdered form of cayenne has been used to throw in people's faces and stuff like that. Ground down peppers or whatever, dried and ground and tossed or whatever into the face and stuff. They knew the effects back then. So in 1980s, the Postal Service was using what we know now as mace, lower form of OC. To actually protect their postmen from dogs. And then, you know, the science and stuff like that, the ability to distill peppers and capsaicinoids down actually, you know, grew. And what we know now as OC is using a different formula than what you will get out of your big box store maces, and even some bear sprays. Some illusions that I want to dispel here. There's some misconceptions that like bear spray is going to be worse than like the OC that I just showed you. That's not really the case, because the major capsaicinoids, which is the distilled stuff, the real stuff that you want to look for, tops out at like 2% for bear spray. There is a 3% major capsaicinoid, but over 2% you can actually start causing burns to the skin. So you're mostly only going to find something like what I showed you here. This is a bottle from First Defense, 1.3%. That's 1.3 major capsaicinoids, not just Olaris and capsicum. Olaris and capsicum, yes, it's, you know, capsaicin, it's the chemical derivative or whatever, so the real distilled, like scientifically engineered and distilled stuff is the major capsaicinoids, the stuff that really is giving you the good heat, as it were. So that's what you really want to look for. That's where you're going to get most of the effect. Now, it does, after a certain point, the paint is only going to do so much. Yes, you can cause burns with like the 3% stuff that Saber sells, but it's still relying on pain compliance. Okay, so whether it's mace or OC, bear spray, it's relying on pain compliance, really. Except in like the 3% version, if it is actually major capsaicinoids, it can actually potentially cause permanent injury to the eye. So it could actually probably like burn the cornea, burn the nerves in the eye. So I don't think you want that. I don't think you want to explain yourself in court that you wanted to cause injury if you ever had to use OC, because OC by itself is something that's supposed to not really be causing permanent injury. So that goes to the laws. Now, using OC even against animals without cause is battery or you know, torturing, because like in this state, I can't even use OC unless a neighbor's dog is like aggressively going after my property. But also, if they are doing that, I can protect my property and I can shoot them, and I can also protect myself. OC is actually great for that if you're not wanting to kill the neighbor's dog, because the neighbor's dog doesn't really necessarily deserve to die, but it just needs to kind of go away. Works pretty well for that. They actually do get the hint and they do remember, at least in my experience. So there's different things that you can, you know, use OC for other than people. But if you're really thinking that it's going to be some magical running juice like Active Self-Protection seems to proclaim, I mean, I would go with, you know, like probably the gel version. Like this is a Saber. I would typically go with First Defense because I'm pretty familiar with them. This is said to be the law enforcement, you know, version, but it's the gel formula. It's going to give you less love back. Let's just say that, because typically if you know anybody that's ever used this stuff, you're going to get some of it back. So Gel reduces that, but it's also harder to take off, and it works well for dogs. So pretty much, if you're going to get some OC, get some gel. It's pretty good stuff. But if you're like trying to soak an area, kind of like in a protest, foam or stream works fine. So there's different versions like cone and stuff like that that you can look at, but do your own research if you're interested in that. Now, the laws regarding it, every state's going to have a little bit of a different law on when you can use it, how much you can carry and stuff like that. But again, it boils down to if you use it and you're not using it for self-defense of yourself or property or whatever, it is battery. And in a lot of cases, you're not going to be able to use OC to defend your property even. Like if somebody's stealing and running away with stuff, you can't douse them with OC. There's a lot of states where it's like that. You might be in a state where they really don't care, but even if your state law says it's battery for somebody using it, without cause, if you're in an area where the criminal has more rights than you do, they're never going to get charged for it. They can do whatever they want. And if you retaliate, you're in the wrong. Just keep that in mind. There's a lot more variables. And so there's some of the more petty laws that before we get into actual usage, just like ownership laws and carrying. In Alaska, you have to be over the age of 21 to be able to keep it in a school. That's the only law that I was able to find on it that didn't go into like use of force or whatever. In like Hawaii, you can only have a half-ounce can of it, and you have to be licensed in it, meaning that you have to have training. So, just for reference, this is a Mark III from First Defense. This is foam, and they clearly label it as foam, 1.3% major capsaicinoids, and the size of the bottle is 1.47 ounces. That's 1.5 ounces. In Hawaii, you can have a half-ounce little thing. So basically, they set you up for the criminals. They make their laws to help the criminals, if you didn't know that already. So now the uses of it. When I was talking earlier about major capsaicinoids versus Olaris and capsicum, this is what I'm talking about. I'll go ahead and pull this one over. There is a difference between Olaris and capsicum, which they will label 10%, but the major capsaicinoids, the really good juice, is 1.33 in this. The major capsaicinoids are the thing to look for and stuff. If it just says capsaicin or other, whatevers, I would not look at that. I want to see major capsaicinoids. And like First Defense, that's all they do is OC. They're not going to give you some crap product. So I go with 1.3%. It's pretty much one of the highest ones that I can find readily available, and it is pretty inexpensive. So just because it says Olaris and capsicum is like 15 or 20%, that doesn't really mean much, because Olaris and capsicum versus like major capsaicinoids, lower bar, let's just say that. So you really want to look at the major capsaicinoids. So anyways, treatment for it. So if you get some of the love back, or you get sprayed, there's a few rules that you want to follow for yourself to make your life a little bit easier. A lot of people think, well, in the instructions it says to profusely flush with water. I would not do that. I absolutely would not do that, because all you're going to do is, if you did not have a pore covered by that OC, you will now. What I would do is I would take something like a microfiber cloth and I would dab the face. And then I would actually work up a sweat and continue dabbing the face. Use something very absorbent like a paper towel or something like that to dab. And yes, it's going to hurt when you push on it, because you're pushing stuff further into your pores and stuff where it is actually sensitive. However, you can use air if you want, but it's going to have a temporary effect of, and it's going to require, you're going to have to sit there behind the air all the time, or in the water. When it comes to water flushing or using air to like cool yourself down and stop the burn, as soon as you go away from that air, or as soon as you stop flushing with water, it comes right back. Because with the water part, it's doing the same thing that the air is doing. It's not actually getting it out of the pores. Once it's in, it's in. Any burn that you are feeling is stuff that you're not going to get out. You are not going to scrub this stuff out. You're not going to be able to wipe it out. You just got to sit there for like 30 minutes, 45 minutes, and just deal with it. Okay? That's just really the fact of the matter. And then afterwards, what I would actually recommend is building up a sweat to push that stuff out. So once you dab, build up a sweat and keep pushing it out. It's not going to be perfect. You're still going to be dealing with that burn, but it's going to be less likely to reactivate on you. Now, this is the next part that I want to talk about, is decontamination. So any of your clothes, you need to get them off and segregate them, put them in a bag and wash them individually. Okay? Because the carriers in these bottles can dry out, but the major capsaicinoids in the Olaris and capsicum can still be active, and it can be reactivated with water, which means that it can use water as the carrier to get into your pores. So just remember that when you're going in showering, before you shower, use like a wet washcloth and, dab, or a wet paper towel and dab, and then wash your face, with the water come down over your head and just washing with soap and water, and try not to rub, but to encourage, dab and lightly rubbing to activate the soap or whatever. And if you have an exfoliant, that might be a good time. But, make sure that you're washing your exposed areas separately, because the last thing you want to do is give some love to downtown because you decide to just step into the shower after getting OC. Because if it's going to be in your hair too. And so it's just going to run down. And again, it's going to use water as a carrier, and it's just going to activate all the stuff that was dormant that didn't actually get into a pore and get used up. So, yeah, that's my recommendation for OC as far as like treatment is concerned. But that's pretty much it for the video. I appreciate you guys watching. Let me know you think of this in the comment below, and if you have somebody that is thinking they're going to use OC as jogging juice or rape juice or whatever else juice, self-defense juice. It's kind of entertaining when people think that it's actually going to work. Unless somebody's really not that determined or they're very sensitive to pain, it's really not going to do all that much in my experience. At least it didn't for me. It didn't do anything but make me more mad. So, anyways, I appreciate you guys watching, and you guys have a good one.